This is Identity at the Center.
Welcome to the Identity at the Center podcast. I'm Jeff, and that's Jim. Hey, Jim.
Hey, Jeff, how are you?
Oh, not so bad. Yourself?
Doing great, man. Today's been kind of the day of focusing on conferences and the show, and I've been doing the scheduling. I think that's the behind-the-scenes part that people don't understand. I think you get it, right? You know how much work goes into the scheduling aspect of things, and it's inevitable. You're going to have reschedules and things like that. I don't know how it equates to the kind of the work that you do with the editing and all the social media, but I will tell you, it's pretty time consuming.
Yeah. I mean, it is what it is. It is the hobby, the job, the 5 to 9, as you like to put it, but it's more like 5 to 5 a.m.
Yeah.
The opposite of what our day jobs normally are. But look, I like doing it. I think this is a fun and hopefully helpful resource for people. Conferences are a lot of work, but those are also fun and helpful resources. You know, today we're going to talk about Identity Management Day in a minute here, but like stuff like that is cool and it brings the community together. So I enjoy it. And, you know, let us say today's April 1st. So I'm on the lookout for any hijinks that might be going on. We have a April 1st episode that was released earlier today. By the time people hear this one, which I think will be April 13th, if I recall, we'll be a couple weeks past that. So hopefully people will have appreciated it and you know, not fallen for any hijinks. But I have not seen too many, but have also not been like on the news yet, especially like the tech sphere, to see like what things people have put out today for April 1st.
Yeah. But, you know, as we're kind of working on getting ready for these conferences, what's occurring to me is like how many great organizations support the podcast, between ID Pro being the official podcast of ID Pro, Cooping Cole with having us and, you know, kind of hosting us and really taking good care of us in terms of getting ready for EIC, as well as the Cybersecurity Alliance, getting ready for Identiverse and what we're going to be doing at Identiverse. And I think those details are going to unfold, but we're going to, you know, make sure that we have a good presence. And of course, we'll do a game show. And then our guest today, the IDSA, has been a partner with us for, it's got to be more than 5 years, right? We've had our guest on 5 times as of today. And then we had Julie. I think at one point, Julie was the all-time, you know, most frequent guest. And I think that exceeded 5. I mean, obviously the podcast hasn't been around for 10 years, but we definitely have gotten a lot of support from the IDSA as well.
Yeah, it's a great organization. Very fortunate to be able to have, you know, these types of things available to us as an industry. So, we got Identity Management Day. It is tomorrow for people who are listening to this for the first time on April 13th. Identity Management Day is the 14th of April. We're going to talk with Jeff Reich in a second. I want to go back to the cloud, to the EIC conference, because we have discount codes for that. You'll find them on our website. I can't talk. What's going on here? We've got the Identiverse conference, which is Cyber Risk Alliance. Shout out to Shirley. She's awesome to work with over on that side. We actually have an improved discount. So it is now up to 30% off. Early bird, I think, might still be available by the time people listen to this. You know, your early bird chances may or may not have different levels, but we do have a 30% discount now on Identiverse. So definitely hope to see people there. Like Jim mentioned, we'll be doing, you know, some sort of game show type thing, as we seem to be prone to do, as well as recording episodes live from the expo hall floor and, you know, taking in the sights and sounds of Vegas, which I know everyone just loves, including myself.
Yeah.
I do love it.
Absolutely.
I'm not saying that tongue in cheek. I love it, but I know that that's maybe polarizing.
It's not, it's polarizing. But I did want to give a shout out. You gave a shout out to Shirley, who I totally agree, completely awesome, totally supports us. But also Marina Cordash, over at
Cordash,
Cole. What's that?
Marina
Am I saying it
Cordash.
wrong? I'm probably saying it wrong. Yeah.
Marina's awesome. Yeah.
My German is a little, you know, a little. So yeah, awesome person supporting us as well.
Yeah. All right. Why don't we get into today's kind of focus, which is Identity Management Day. Jim, you and I are going to be doing some stuff around that, but we'll save that for a little bit later. Let me introduce Jeff Reich. He is the executive director of the Identity Defined Security Alliance, IDSA-alliance.org. It's his 5th time on the show with us. So, Jim, you owe him a jacket as well. We have to start printing jackets pretty soon because we have a lot of folks who need jackets. But welcome to the show, Jeff.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And I'm waiting for that jacket. Thank you. I'm looking forward to it. It's great to be back. You know, you mentioned here's all the organizations that support you, and you're obviously grateful for all that. There's a reason that every organization in this industry supports you. It's because, one, you're great guys to just be with. You're just fun to hang around with. Let's start with that. But you really provide a good service, a great service, with the podcast that focuses on everything that's going around identity, everything around you, because you're at the center, right? Great name, too. That was a smart choice. And you do it in a real supportive way, so everyone wants to find a way to pay you back. So don't underestimate why that happens. It happens for a reason.
Well, flattery will get you everywhere in this show, as I've said before. Thank you so much for that. That was very kind. Look, we do the show that we want to do and that we think we enjoy doing, and we hope others do. And, we try not to take ourselves seriously too much. Obviously, identity is a serious conversation, but we like to have fun and try to be approachable, because I think there's plenty of places to go to like technical information and read a spec, for example. But a lot of identity happens outside of specs. And so we try to be as well-rounded as possible, even sometimes straying into information security at large, because some of that stuff also affects how we do identity. And so, I appreciate that. Like I said, this is a great community. It's fun to engage with. I would encourage anybody who sees any of us at conferences or on the street or at the airport, come up, say hello. We're always happy to meet folks, that are out there and learn from them.
I want to riff off one thing you just said before we get into any further. I guess I'm going to take us there. You mentioned, people and how it's always people that are making it. We just recently did one of our webinars, which was an Identity Management Day preview. And, Identity Management Day is broken up into 3 regions: Oceania, Asia, Europe, Middle East, and Africa, and the Americas. And we follow the sun, basically, which is why it's a 21-hour event. It's 21 hours of identity goodness is a term that we use. And I had representatives from each of the 3 co-chairs, Identity XP in Melbourne, Australia, OMADA in Copenhagen, Denmark, and Savient here on the West Coast in the US. The 3 co-chairs for the 3 regions. And we talked about what makes a good conference and what to look for in each one. And we'll have an opportunity to talk about some of the highlights coming out of each region, I think, this year. And then I asked at the end, I got them all together and I said, so what's the one thing we really need to focus on maybe for the next 5 years that's the most important component of identity and making it work going forward? And all 3 had a slightly different version of saying people. Even though AI and non-human identities and agentic identity is there. I was at the RSA conference last week, a couple weeks ago when you're seeing this. And I challenged people to find a booth that didn't have AI on the banner or agentic on the banner, and no one could find one. So we're there. This is where we are now. That's good. We recognize that. Even with all that, everyone that knows how to make it work says the most important part of what we need to do going forward is people. So, and you help make that, really. I'm not going to try to butter you up anymore, but that really is the key.
Butter away, my friend. I'm slather it on. Look, we get lost sometimes in technology. So, but we forget the actual word is identity. Identity is, it has been human for a very long time, and it's now extending into other areas. But it's people, it's process, it's technology, it's a whole bunch of different things. And, we definitely should probably just jump right into, what is Identity Management Day? You've got some themes that are kind of set up. Before we do that, though, because people might not be familiar with IDS Alliance, maybe just to give us a quick 30-second on kind of what it is and why you put on this thing.
I'm happy to. So IDSA, Identity Defined Security Alliance, has been around for 7 years or so, to answer your Julie question earlier. And our mission is we're a nonprofit, and we focus on raising the level of security and identity security awareness around identity. That's it. that may seem like a simple mission, but it has tentacles that reach everywhere. As you already said, it's security, it's people, it's process, it's software. Everything that happens now, whether it's from a machine or not, has an identity associated with it. So we either have research papers, working groups, educational webinars on how we're going to deal with this, and about 90% of what we do is available free to the public.
You guys do a lot, but I'd say the Identity Management Day is kind of your hallmark event. Give us an overview. You talked about the different regions, but give us the 411 of what's going to be happening during Identity Management Day.
It's a good question, and thank you. That and our annual research paper, which we publish in September. Those are our two big events. And with Identity Management Day, it started off as an 8-hour event focused mainly on the Americas. And we have expanded that into the 3 regions because there were people interested. And they said, hey, can we have an Identity Management Day too? And the answer really should have been, no, we don't need multiple ones. We need one huge one. So that's what we're left with. So Identity XP in Melbourne, Australia approached us first and said, we want to do this with you. So what you're going to be seeing there, and they, by the way, have a hybrid event. They're the only hybrid component of what we're doing. They have an in-person event in Melbourne where they have speakers and some sponsors. And we stream all of that as part of the online 21-hour online event. So some of the speakers you're going to get there are from, and Australia ends up being a different animal for a whole bunch of reasons. They're a large area. They're not necessarily densely populated. And as a result, when there's an identity issue there, it affects almost everyone. Scale has a different meaning there. Scale hits everyone pretty quickly. So they take a slightly different approach. It's a good, healthy approach to what they do, but they work a lot of the vendors work more closely with each other there, I think, than I've seen in other regions, although it does happen everywhere else too because of that. And there is a certain amount of geographical isolation that's there too. I mean, certainly the internet makes everyone available, but there's a component to you're in Australia or you're in the rest of the world. So I like the approach they take, and what you're going to see coming out of that, I think, really focuses on what some of the regulations are going to be there, and you're also going to talk a bit about the rest of Asia as well, what the impact of issues are, and what the most recent breaches are. They specifically still talk about what's the latest breach we've had. If you compare that to the Americas, for instance, that's not as big a deal for us anymore, and it's sad because it's just accepted. Yeah, which one happened today? But they're a little more rare, but they have a larger impact. So I think you're going to see that focus there, along with a lot of nice young people working their way up into the industry. And I'm going to talk even more about that in just a minute. So that's what we have going on in Oceania, Asia. As we move to EMEA with Omada hosting that out of Copenhagen, I really love the fact, by the way, on that webinar they talked about, we had someone from each of the 3 regions. We had 4 unique dialects on that webinar. And that made me giddy. I haven't quite figured out why, but it made me feel like we have people from all over the world here, and they're all interested in the same thing. It's fantastic. So what you're going to get to see out of EMEA is some great headliners. You mentioned Kubiker Cole. Martin Kubinger's going to be there. Simon Moffat's going to be there speaking. Paul Walker's going to be there from Omada. Mr. NHI Lalit Chota is going to be there. And Paul's going to be, not only do they have sessions, Paul's going to be leading a panel with those other 3. That is going to be a powerhouse panel when you think about those 4 individuals.
So Jeff, let me just interrupt. When you say they're going to be there, you mean they're going to be on site in Denmark, or virtually they're going to be there?
They're going to be online. The only on-site component we have is in Australia. So everything else is online. They're going to be just like we are here now. And I count this as here. So, or there, depending on your perspective.
I was going to say, if you need somebody to go to Denmark, Jeff and I would volunteer for that. Just keep that in mind for, it's such an awesome city. Such an awesome city.
It's because you get so much of the old, old, and it's still intact, old world beauty, charm, architecture, everything else. And then you go 2 blocks away and you have a brand new shopping strip center with really nice shops. but they all blend. There is, it's not the one versus the other. It's and Tivoli Gardens and everything. It's a beautiful place. I love Copenhagen, in case you couldn't gather that. So, and it sounds like you do as well.
But again, open invite if you want to have Jeff and I travel to Copenhagen next year or to Australia. We love the people, and we'd love to come and spend time with them in person.
Well, hold on a second. I haven't been to either, so I don't know if I love the people yet or not. Let's say I like the people.
Let's just say that you're willing to try.
That's fair.
You're open to it.
Yeah, I'd love to go. I've never been to either place, and I'll go to anywhere at least once. But yeah, for sure.
Okay, I just made a note, and I'll keep that in mind. So I talked about the powerhouse we're going to have in EMEA. Plus we have other good speakers too. I'm not trying to diminish anyone else, but those are 3 or 4 names that if you're in the identity industry and you've been in it for a couple of years or more, those names. You've encountered them before, one way or another, either in what they write or presentation or online things. And then we move to the Americas, and we have some great speakers here as well, without question. We have Enrique Teixeira is going to be there. Another one of those big names that if you've been doing this, you know who they are. We have other great speakers. There's one I'm going to point out in particular, though. We have an 11th grader that's going to speak. This is the first time we dipped down into another age group, really. Although I guess you could say with me starting, anyone else is a different age group that's in this industry. But we were approached by an 11th grader who wrote a paper on cybersecurity and neuroscience and how one really feeds the other. And we read it, and so I was director of operations for a research center at University of Texas San Antonio for a while, and got engaged with students and postdocs and dealing with this. I judge science fairs. It's one of my favorite hobbies. And I saw this paper and said, "Wow, it makes me feel good." I hadn't even met her yet because, wow, assuming we leave enough of the earth to survive, it's going to be in good hands, because there are people like this that are in 11th grade, and she didn't just start now, that are not only brilliant, but can apply it and say, here's what the real world means, as opposed to either I did research or I used, ChatGPT to write a paper, or whatever else is going on right now. I know that there are people that are capable of continuing the earth in a really good way. So to me, as much as all the other speakers are going to be fantastic, that's the highlight I'm looking for.
Yeah, let me follow up on that, because another organization that I forgot to mention that we heavily partner with is DIAF, and they sponsor young folks who are in their education process or right out of school, get into the identity industry through the conference exposure. And I mean, Jeff and I have met several of the people that they've chosen, and they've played a role in these conferences, and super bright people. I guess I've kind of come away with the same optimistic perspective that you just mentioned, Jeff.
Yeah, it makes me happy. It makes me feel good, because whatever I've done, and time will be the judge of whether it's even noticed. I'd like to think I've done something positive. All of us want to feel that way. But what makes me feel even better is whatever state we live in, it's going to get better. So it's a wonderful feeling.
Yeah, and I think you're doing a big thing with this Identity Management Day, and like I've seen the progression of it. You talked about those people who are participating. Maybe this becomes an official holiday one day, because that's kind of the way I look at it, is like Identity Management Day. Like, I'm in identity management. I'm a practitioner. This is a day to celebrate me and my ilk. So that's for sure. Hey, one thing that we talked about, in preparing for the show, is that you have the theme for this year. And can you talk to us a little bit about that theme?
Happy to talk about the theme. First of all, on the holiday, I like the idea, but because I run Identity Management Day, I'm not going to get the day off. So, we'll have to come up with a way to do that. But in any case,
you're like the Santa Claus of Identity Management Day. Santa works on Christmas Eve and into Christmas morning.
Yeah.
You just have to deal with it, Jeff.
And if I get the rest of the year off, then I'll take it. Okay. That sounds good. The theme for Identity Management Day this year is finding identity, the search for you, me, and the machines. And allow me to expound on that a bit. If you think about it, especially with everything we've already talked about so far today, you can see how it makes sense because identity has been human-based since the dawn of humans, right? And that's good. Carbon-based identity, pretty easy to understand. Whether you have to go down to DNA or not, you still know what it means. But now there's you and me, which means now we have interaction between identities, which brings up themes like authentication and authorization. How do I know that you are Jeff and Jim, other than the fact that I know the two of you? And I'm still convinced AI is not yet good enough to replicate both of you at once. There aren't enough computers to do that effectively. So authentication, validation of who someone is, that's a big challenge now. It's bigger than before because of scale and the internet. You know, me dealing with someone in Copenhagen, authentication wasn't an issue a long time ago because I could use a third-party source. A lot of time elapsed between the beginning and the end of the transaction. Now they're instantaneous. So it is a big deal. And then the machines come in because of what's going now with agentic identity and non-human identities and machine identities. And I actually treat all three slightly differently, even though they're all closely related. It's an identity that may or may not be associated with a person. It may be directly associated with a person. And it may pretend to be associated with a person, but really isn't. I'll use deepfake as an example there that we've already referred to once. I happened to, I was at the deepfake summit about a month ago in Houston. And a lot of experts getting together and talking about deepfakes and how do we deal with this problem? Is it a problem? Have we solved it? What's going to happen next? And even with all the best minds around this in one room, when the question's asked, what are we going to do from here? Most people still stared into the group and like, I really don't know yet. So you tie all that together. We need to find identities, not only our own, but what every identity we deal with, and find a way to get a level of trust and authentication with it so we can do things that we have confidence in. And I don't know if you heard this, I'm going to paraphrase it. Recently, Fed Chair Powell in the U.S. At a press conference, which would be a few weeks ago, made a statement about confidence, consumer confidence, and the definition he used. And I'm paraphrasing, so I'm not quoting him, but confidence is a feeling you get right before reality hits. And I think that works. That may be what he's remembered for more than anything else. We lack confidence in the identity industry, and that's our theme for this year. Not that we lack confidence, but we need to get around it.
Well, let's talk about AI a little bit because it's kind of permeates everything, and I get it. Like we've been talking about AI for a long time, especially on this show. We joke about it being AI at the center sometimes, but it really has permeated like every single discussion, even in my day job. As a consultant in identity, every single client that I'm talking to is asking me about AI and permissions and access and how are we going to secure these things, just from a valid use perspective, let alone when we start thinking about things like deep fakes and, nefarious ways to get identity into a situation that we don't want it to be in. I'm curious, where do you fall right now from a optimist, pessimist, somewhere in the middle? Like, how do you currently feel about the way AI is impacting identity?
So where I fall is right on the ground. But
fair,
because gravity works. But so I'm going to answer with what we're doing at IDSA around that, because although I don't create all the work that comes out of our working groups, as an example, but I do offer some guidance, and sometimes they take it, sometimes they don't. And it's IDSA output. And we have two working groups, one that's AI and identity, pretty straightforward, one would think. And we have another one that's machine and agentic identities, which on its own seems pretty straightforward as well. we have two groups working on a framework, what they want to publish and what it's going to mean. And we discovered they aren't, first of all, they're not silos, but they're not even close to being silos. There is a lot of overlap. We're not merging the groups. There is enough work to do uniquely, create deliverables out of each. But AI ends up being across the board. So for an example, should we focus on AI for IAM? Or should we focus on IAM for AI? There's one simple question that I can drop with those groups. That's 6 months work.
I don't think we can ignore either, though.
No, and I'm not suggesting we do. It's 6 months work to really get into, you can find, here's a tool that can do IAM for AI today. And then there's going to be a new AI function that comes out next month, and it won't work for that. That's why it's going to be a 6-month effort. And we need to be at the higher framework level rather than at the tool level. And it's something that, as much as most of our members are identity vendors, and I love them, most of them focus on, because they have a business to run, getting a product out that can do that. I look at most of what's out there today as bridge solutions for that reason. We're nowhere done. We're just really as much as we think we're fully into AI and it's happening every day, we're still just dipping maybe our first 2 toes in it. We are not into it yet. So I think what we haven't done a good job of is really take a step back and say, what is the overall architecture and structure and framework without having to get technical about it? How do we want to make it work for ourselves? And that ends up resulting in many cases in guardrails. And I would offer, and you may find this, Jeff, in your consulting, that when I talk to any organization about what do your guardrails look like for your AI, those are the people that say, how do I manage this? Well, there's the beginning of your answer. Without guardrails, and it doesn't have to be technical guardrails, but just saying, here's what I want AI to be able to do. And by definition, I don't ever want it to do anything else. Or I want to do these 3 things and explore in this area, which can be very advantageous. When you set that up as your ground rules, then you have to find those tools and implementations that can help you accomplish that. When you can't do that, what you're doing is saying, well, I'm just going to use AI because I'm going to save money, because it's faster, because it's cool. All those reasons are there, but it will grow teeth, get right behind you, and bite you.
Well, I think we know what happens when an AI runs amok. Just see our April 1st episode and Open having some issues with that. It's a tough question to answer right now because I don't think people really know what the answer is. I think we're trying to apply principles that we've learned across the decades of identity management and security in general to say, hey, here's how we think it should work, but we just don't know yet. This is still moving so quickly. I'm curious if you've heard anything. Like, are there themes that you're picking up from the conversations you're having with either vendors or other members of IDS, Alliance, or even working groups and things like that to say, hey, we know we don't have the full answer yet, but you mentioned guardrails as an example. Like, are there other things like that are starting to sort of surface maybe that might be options in how we secure identities like that?
There's a few things I've seen come out. And the one that stands out to me, even though you may not think of it, is standing privilege. Standing privilege is a principle that this industry has been using for a very long time, saying here's either an individual or a process that always needs to get X number of things done, and they always need to be able to get that done. Well, standing privilege to me is beginning to crumble because the processes that are going to be used that need that authority can be ephemeral. You could have a Kubernetes container that's going to perform something that needs full admin authority, and it only lasts 1.5 seconds. And then it's gone. It just no longer exists, that all the resources have been allocated to something else, and it's now maybe in history or maybe not. Did you log it? Do you have any control over what it was going to do? And do you have any observability of what it did? So I'd say that's the first principle that I'm seeing coming out of this is, what do you do with standing privilege? That leads to the second observation, and this one's a personal one, not what I'm getting from members. I believe PAM, or privileged access management, as we have been using it, is obsolete. It may not feel that way everywhere yet, but the reason I feel that way is everyone and everything is now privileged, even if it's for a very narrow focus. Typically, a privileged account was, you had sysadmin, you could do anything for every. First of all, you can't even get your arms around everything right now, and that environment is fluid. The containers is an example. It changes all the time. So privileged access now has to mean who can do the things that can really cause damage. That's how I define privilege. That becomes virtually everyone. So I'm not saying don't manage privilege access. I'm saying treat everyone as if they have privilege and manage the access that way. So that's a personal observation of mine. Jeff, it looks like you have something to say about that.
Yeah, so interesting. I think the standing privilege one is definitely one that we've talked about for a while, and the holy grail destination would be something along the lines of a zero standing privileges environment. Makes sense, right? Don't give access unless it's needed at the time you need it, and then take it away. But the realist in me is like, look, I've worked for large organizations. I work for a large organization. To do that is just not going to happen because companies are not built, they're not automated enough from an identity infrastructure standpoint, and from a business engagement and logic standpoint to say, okay, well, what do you mean I won't have the access? Well, trust me, you're going to have it because we're going to grant it automatically because we've invested in all these tools to make that automation happen. A lot of companies haven't. They are still, they may not have invested in an identity governance tool, right? Where they're still doing like manual joiner, mover, leaver functions. Or maybe they did, but they only took it to like Active Directory and that's it. They haven't connected like the 500 other applications that they need. And so while I like the idea of it, I just don't know if it's a realistic destination for most organizations. I'm a fan. You should be trying to get there. I just don't know if you can, if it's realistic as a goal for most people when it comes to that.
Well, I think I was going to pick up a little bit where Jeff finished off there because I was thinking the same thing, which is, and I think you were trying to come out strong about privileged access management because if you truly have zero standing privileges, right, then traditional approaches to PAM probably don't add a whole lot on top of that. I just saw this video the other day. I don't know if you guys remember the cheating scandal on a website called Ultimate Bet. So this was like in the early 2000s. They had for the system administrator something called God mode. And the God mode was like you could sit at a table and see the cards that everybody had. Well, one of the founders of this website, this betting site, had access to the God mode application. Now you start thinking like, okay, well, I can think of 15 different ways that we could have put the stop to that, right? We could have been logging how often the account was used. We could have done check in, check out a password for it, which is like traditional privileged access management type things. So I was just thinking like, all right, well, if you can't get to zero standing, I kind of have the overall philosophy, don't let perfection get in the way of getting better. And I kind of feel like at least I agree with you. The journey ought to be towards zero standing privileges. But I think kind of traditional PAM gets you better than you are today. And just staying a step ahead of everyone else is usually like, if you look at any of these safari videos in Africa, right? It's the lions always go after the slowest buffalo. Don't be the slowest buffalo. So that's all I was thinking as you were talking about this thing.
So you both make valid points, and I don't want you to think that I was suggesting that by June 1st, we need to have no standing privilege. I'm not suggesting that at all, but I do think it needs to be the vision and the goal in the same way, and I'm going to use a similar example, and we're not there yet. I've been doing this for close to 50 years, all right? And about my second year in, I remember saying, we need to kill passwords. I think passwords are finally dead. I've been hearing that for over 40 years, right? And it has been a goal. It's been aspirational. We are actually starting to get there. It may still be an asymptotic approach, And we may be just be cutting the distance between us and no password by half, but there's always still another half we could cut. But the only way we're getting there now is through the persistence of the vision that passwords alone don't give you good security. And we've all known that, but we never had a better solution. Now between passkeys and tokens and hardware keys and server-to-server authentication and other tools that we have, we can start saying you don't necessarily need to know a password. And that's a good thing. The next thing we need to get rid of maybe are SMS authentications, but that's another podcast, another show. So by staying aspirational on killing the password, I think we can be aspirational on killing standing privilege. And I think we'll reach it faster than the journey it took us to get rid of passwords. And we're not done with it yet, but I think we are. And actually, I don't think they're ever going to completely go away, but I think they'll become negligible.
Well, in an effort to become even more opinionated than I already am, I feel like this is another situation where we have a lot of great concepts in identity. So zero standing privilege, privileged access management, identity governance, continuous identity, zero trust. And now we've got, AI and stuff like that. If I'm a real organization, I'm barely keeping up with any of these things. And so passkeys are a great example of that. Nobody likes passwords. Nobody likes them, right? Because they're not a great solution. It's just what we have. And so, okay, great. We've got this thing called passkey. Let's start getting it rolled out. FIDO Alliance has done a great job of pulling, major industry players together to get a standard in place and get adoption capability in place. That took years to get it done. And it's still, further out for a lot of other folks that just are now starting to think about it because they've been working on, let's call it, user lifecycle things for the last decade, because that's what they were told a decade ago they need to start working on. And so it will never move as quickly as any of us want it to. And that's why I tend to be more conservative when it comes to timelines. It's like, okay, is this the year the password dies? Yeah, we've been saying that, like you said, Jeff, for the last 10 years, it seems like, right? And every year is like, okay, this is the year that's going to finally die. No, it's not. Pass is going to be around for a while because there's going to be people who can't use passkeys. There's going to be other authentication methods, whatever. But we are making progress. And sometimes that progress gets lost when we look at it from the day-to-day view. So if we look at it every year, every 2 years, every 3 years, are we better at MFA than we were 5 years ago? Heck yeah, because we had to be because of COVID. COVID pushed a lot of companies into the MFA world because they had to be secure because all their workers were all of a sudden doing remote work. There wasn't that, punch in the face that was like, hey, you've got to get out there and do this right now, except for that. And so there will be other triggering events like that I feel like will drive adoption. And, maybe it's AI. We're seeing a lot of effort put into this to say, okay, well, how are we going to secure these things? Because we've also been designing identity systems and identity, programs around human scale. And that means speed of humans. AI doesn't work at human speed, right? So what it used to be is days, weeks, months, years. Now it needs to be nanoseconds, milliseconds, seconds is the greatest, scale you're doing things. So I think there is this idea of well, there's so many shiny things. What do I grab onto? Is it, I've been hearing zero standing privileges now for a while. I'll do that. And then now someone tells me I have to do this other thing. So, it's almost like I'm a kid in a candy store and I can't pick which one, I want to go after.
Well, Jeff, on that, if you're in a candy store, you're a kid in a candy store and you're told you can pick a candy, that doesn't solve anything except you get some candy right now. And isn't that wonderful?
I'm getting my Snickers bar, man. That's what I'm picking. And I'll be happy with that.
You're in a candy store and you go for Snickers.
Snickers is the best candy in the world, and I will come at me in the DMs on LinkedIn. They are open and ready.
You're the nougat peanut chocolate guy, right? Okay, that's fine. I'm not judging. Well, maybe I was a little, but I don't want anyone to think that I'm a purist on this. I am not. I know what it takes to be able to. I like to think I've seen at least what it takes to be able to make a seismic shift like this. And that's exactly what it is. But the way we're going to get there is to just push, a millimeter a week. And maybe that's all it's going to take, but we will never make the progress unless we do that push. So everything we do, I think, needs to at least be leaning that way. Now, to your question about a smaller organization that's starting off, they're going to be a software shop. And they're not going to be able to get all of this. They can't be that leading edge on everything because they're not an identity shop. It's not what they do. So rather than buying 8 different pieces of software, they're going to conflict with each other and not give them the result they really need. What they need to do, and this goes back to the fundamentals of, I was a programmer. Before you were a developer, you were called a programmer. I was a programmer a long time ago. And what we had to do at the very beginning was completely do, before you even do pseudocode, something else that's a foreign word now, you had to come up with a flow of what needed to happen. And it had to include what needs to be included in that and what things need to be excluded. And that may be the world needs to be excluded, except for what I'm working on. We don't do that very well anymore. And faster computers and AI have gotten us there. And I don't want us to go back. I'm not that, back in the day, we did it better. No, we didn't. Because I used to have, when I wrote code, I had one, it was on cards, okay? And I had one test run a week. And if I had a JCL error that just caused it to fail at the beginning, I had to wait another week before I could test the program again. Can you imagine a developer having to deal with that today? No, that would be stupid. You can run it and then run again and you find a new error and you keep finding new errors. That's great. But we are still skipping the fundamental. How do we structure it? What does it need to do? What's the regression testing? And boy, we really got off the track from identity here, didn't we?
Yeah, but I wanted to weigh in before we completely move on. So, Jeff, you're talking about something that is totally legitimate, the zero standing privileges, because Jeff and I are pragmatic by nature. We work with clients. We never identify clients, obviously, during our podcast, but we do a podcast and we work with some cutting edge clients that are doing continuous authentication, that are doing shared signals framework, that are doing zero standing privileges, right? They're the ones who have budget. We also work with clients where you talk to them and you find out, oh my God, they have the passwords in an Excel spreadsheet, but the Excel spreadsheet is password protected. It's like, oh my good Lord, what are we going to do? You have to be able to, as a practitioner, you have to be able to adjust to this scenario, but you can't say, well, the world is we're dealing with the spreadsheet, or the world is that we're dealing with just the cutting edge. It depends on the where the client is. I keep bringing it up, and I wish I knew who to attribute it to, but he talked about the information security poverty line, and there are organizations that are below the poverty line. And I see organizations like that, and I've worked with some in the past, and essentially, like if Microsoft offers it as part of Entra, as part of their Entra license, it's like, now we have something we can implement, we'll do that. And I see other organizations who are, like, hey, we'll take a chance on some of this stuff because this might be the next big thing. And not only that, but we have a real world use case now that can't wait. And we're going to, take a risk that this company might not be around in a year.
Here's my thought on this. I think we all want to be there, right? And hopefully that's coming across as like, yeah, like these are all great ideas and we definitely want to get there. My problem that I have with this is that it's easy to get distracted. It's the new shiny thing. Oh, I've got to do that. And yet I didn't do any of the basics to get there. I'm still doing faxes for onboarding. Like what? And yet you want to do like this other crazy, advanced thing over here. Get the basics done first and then start looking at the other stuff, because those shiny features assume that you've already tackled the basics. Like zero standing privilege is actually a great example of this. It's like, okay, the only way to get zero standing privilege is through automation. Full-blown, comprehensive automation across all of your systems, and it's rock solid and it works all the time. If you're not doing that today, good luck with standing privilege. Zero standing privilege. Like that's just not going to work for you. And so that's kind of like where I see a lot of organizations struggle. It's like, yeah, like these are all great concepts. You should be moving towards that, but get the basics done first and then start to think about how you're going to extend past that. Because if you get the basics done, chances are you're going to be pretty compliant with whatever you need to be compliant with, as long as you're doing the basics.
That's going to get you 80% of the way there, at least. I completely agree with you. And it still goes back to figure out what you want to do and stop focusing on things that aren't core to what you're trying to do, but seem sexy. It may look great, but it's going to take you away from your core. And now you're going to be doing two things poorly.
I got to tell you, we moved away from identity management today, but this is a great conversation. I think these are the types of conversations that I think people around the world are having in their own little, in their own rooms, their own conferences and things like that. So it wouldn't surprise me that we hear some of this on Identity Management Day. Is that fair, Jeff?
Oh, I think you can expect it. I can guarantee it. Because you're not just going to see, hey, here's the greatest new identity tool. You're going to see some of that. But Jim, to your point, we live in gray. We live in the gray area. There are, if you're at the extreme, you're actually missing out on a lot. So you have to live in the gray area.
Speaking of gray area, what a transition. Gray area makes me think of quantum computing and cryptography and quantum computing. So we've already gone pretty long on this show, but I did not want to not ask you this question because you have some great thoughts on this that you wanted to share. My big thing is like the quantum fears are making people start worrying about whether or not Bitcoin is going to be broken at some point, right? Is SHA-256? We know it's not going to, be the king of the hill forever, right? And we're going to need something quantum, resistant or quantum proof?
The term I would use would be quantum resilient, because it's becoming somewhat cliche, but you can't stop it. You can't stop what's going to happen. It's no different. It's an arms race. All right. If you have a weapon and your opponent has the same weapon, you're going to want one that's a little better, and they'll want one that's a little better than yours. So that's really what's happening here, although it doesn't have to be based in evil, although in some cases it is. So I go back to, I think at one point, Jim, you and I may have talked about this. I remember when triple DES was the encryption standard that came out around, I think it was part of the Orange Book series, the color Rainbow series. It was the Orange Book. And triple DES was how you needed security. It was the most secure thing we had. And before the ink was dry, it was broken. So, and now we have better computers to break it. Once quantum is truly focused on encryption in particular, and I'll talk about other components, I think, because any cryptocurrency is based on encryption. The ledger has to have faith, has to demonstrate faith that there is a unique transaction entry in there. It's the only one there, and it was never compromised. That's done through a form of encryption. Quantum computers, when you have enough computing power, cooling, and money to make it work, will break that. It's software. It will break it. So you can count on that. I'm not certain it'll be in my lifetime. It may be. It's more likely going to be in yours. And what we need to do is not fear it and not say what's going to happen. What we shouldn't do is just say sell everything and get gold and stuff it under your mattress. Although I know someone that's done that. I actually know someone that did that.
They made money this year then. Last year they made money.
Oh, they would have made money if they sold it. But if you keep the gold, you may or may not make. That's the whole point of a commodity, right? That what we're not going to do is get into the psychology of buying and selling commodities.
Yeah, forget gold. We should be investing in RAM sticks. That's where the real money is right now.
But when you look at things like where I think quantum is going to really help identity and security is if you have a connection, whether it's audio or with server to server or just data to data, when you can create with quantum computing a quantum entanglement, if you've heard this term, that means you essentially have two components that are mirror images of each other. They're not the same, they're mirror images. And when something happens to one, essentially an inverse action happens to the other. When you have a quantum entanglement, the act of simply viewing it, observing it, breaks that entanglement because both sides now change. Now it's a big concept that more and more people are going to start seeing soon, because quantum entanglement, I think, is going to provide the next big level of security for us. And it's going to come from quantum computing. But the downside of quantum computing is everything you're counting on today will become somewhat paper thin once quantum computing becomes a bit more democratized and available.
I think, I've heard different estimates for when quantum computing would become available. And I think what I heard was that the biggest risk is really, we're doing all this cryptographic exchange of messages. Someone could be wire sharking and saving those messages off so that by the point that they're able to use a quantum computer, they could break them. I don't even know if that's true. I don't really understand it well enough to say, okay, that's a realistic concern or not. Jeff, do you have any tips? Like, what should people be doing right now? Is it just keeping an ear on the news and having the curiosity to kind of figure out what is out there? Or what do you tell people? When people ask you, and I'm asking you right now, what do you advise?
Well, good. I count you as a person, so that's a valid when people ask. Thank you. So some of that's going to be out of my area of expertise, but especially when you focus on identity and when you deal with the identity associated with a crypto wallet, for instance. In fact, crypto wallets contain identities very often. It's not simply cryptocurrency. A digital wallet can now contain a driver's license in many states in the U.S. A passport in the EU is going to be in a digital wallet. That's all a form of crypto right now and encryption that we're depending on for our identities. The things I often recommend are, first of all, make sure you have a backup of what you do. Different for a cryptocurrency. You can't necessarily back that up. There are ways to get it done. But when you're not actually making a transaction, get it on something removable and get it in a lead-line safe. That may sound a bit overreactive, but I have one in my house, and it's I feel very comfortable that I have availability of the things that are important should there be a fire at the home or something else happens. And it's in a location that's not easily found. I'm not even going to come close to saying right now where it is. So it would take a certain amount of torture for that to happen. But the advice I give is back up what you can, first of all. And to your point, see what's going on in the world. Watch the news stories about where a compromise occurred and find out why. Right now, many of those compromises occur through social engineering rather than hacking per se. That's where our biggest exposure is. Hey, we just got back to people again, didn't we? Because social engineering focuses entirely on how could I convince you that you need to give me something? Thank you very much. Now I'm going to compromise whatever it is you had or whatever it is you control for someone else. So be situational awareness. Be aware of what's going on. Whenever you're asked for any information, don't believe it. It doesn't matter who it maybe your spouse or partner, there's a certain level of trust that probably needs to be there. But beyond that, when you're asked for something, don't believe it. Find a way to validate it. Phishing still works. The reason it works is people say, this looks like a valid email. I'll just click this link. Boom, you're done. It doesn't matter what you enter. You're already done. So when you get something like that, always go back to what the source should be and confirm, did you just send this to me? It may seem like extra work. It won't seem like extra work when you do it and someone else didn't and they lost whatever it is they had of value. So back up what you have. Be aware of what's going on. And where you can put in a control, do that. If you can add another factor of authentication when you log into something, do it. I know it may seem like a pain. And people don't like brushing their teeth either, but it's better than having your teeth pulled out, right? So brush your teeth. Find a way to do another method of authentication, especially for the things that are of value. Not everything. If you're going to go look at sports scores, you don't need multiple ways to authenticate yourself. But if you're going to look at your Polymarket account where you're betting on those sports scores, then you might want to have a couple different methods of making sure it's you that's getting in and no one else. How's that for a current example?
I love it. I mean, I think this might be the first time we mentioned Polymarket on this show, but it's an interesting look at how we actually have to manage all this stuff. So I'm with you on this. I feel like we could torture you for a little bit longer, maybe get the location of that safe by making you stick around and talk with us for several more hours. But let's start to wrap things up and take it to the Identity Management Day as like a finale. And we asked this question last week, but we're going to do it again because we've got you here. Let's talk about theme songs for Identity Management Day. I gave a couple last week. People can go back and listen to those, or listen to that last 5 minutes of our episode. But I'm curious, Jeff, if you could pick like one or two theme songs to celebrate Identity Management Day 2026, what would you pick?
Well, I'd start with the theme, which is finding identity. It kind of leads right into the Finding Nemo theme. Now, that may not be your favorite song, but it actually, when we were coming up with a theme, that's the first thing we said, well, it sounds like Finding Nemo. Well, then we need to have a tagline after it. But Finding Nemo, I think, is going to be the first one that fits into there. Go ahead and judge all you want. I'm not necessarily a Finding Nemo fan, but it kind of fits. I think any song by the Searchers works because you're searching for you, me, and the machines. And that can actually title almost any song from the 50s or 60s. I'm old. What can I say? But any song by the Searchers certainly fits in with the theme. And what's a good one that's dealing with the machine? I mean, you could go Rage Against the Machine.
Rage Against the Machine.
Yeah, Tom Morello. Yeah, why not, right?
Yeah, take your anger out on some of these things. So you haven't heard that the episode where we talked about it yet, but I mentioned I Will Survive and When the Bodies Hit the Floor as like two options, kind of tongue in cheek as things that are out there. A couple other ones I think like Master of Puppets and, from an identity standpoint, trying to, juggle all that. And then Daft Punk, Harder, Better, Faster, Stronger, something along those lines where, again, I'm thinking more of like a playful nature of what Identity Management Day might look like.
Okay, well, so there's going to be a Talking Heads song in there somewhere.
Once in a lifetime, maybe?
I think Once in a Lifetime, yeah, that could work.
Except this every year.
Pardon? Well, not the theme. The theme changes every year. Last year, if you remember, it was the mouthful Existential Identity.
That sounds like AI.
That was actually the driving force behind that name last year. Yeah. Just like you talked about the back office effort for getting the podcast out, there's a lot of work around a 21-hour event. I'm not lying here. But sometimes the toughest thing is coming up with, we need a theme that can stick. And that is not easy.
Yeah. So 21 hours. Why not 24 hours?
Because we came up with a number of hours each region was willing to give us.
Okay. So we need each region to donate another hour next year, and then we'll get to 24.
I'm going to hit them up for that. And I hate you now. You want me to do this for 24 hours? I want to know where that safe is.
I'm going to keep signing you up for things you didn't ask for until I know where that crypto is, man.
What crypto?
Yeah, good answer.
Yeah, hey, I used to do work where I had to answer things like that. So yeah, I'm practiced at it.
All right, let's go ahead and leave it there for this week.
Wait, I didn't get to vote on the song?
Oh, yeah, Jim, I forgot. You didn't chime in there.
I had like the perfect answer lined up, I think.
Well, hit me. Let's do it.
So how do you feel about Beastie Boys first?
I mean, you got to fight for your right.
Okay. So, and again, Jeff Rich, you led right into my answer, right? Because 21 hours, you stay up for the whole thing, right? So you have to be awake for at least 21 hours. Hopefully you're taking a shower before it starts. So you're up for probably 24 hours. And it ends in the Western Hemisphere time, right? The U.S. and South America. Anyway, which includes Brooklyn. No sleep till Brooklyn, baby.
All right. Yeah, there you go.
Well, Brooklyn's in the East Coast, but yeah, I see where you're going with it. I'm just glad you didn't pick sabotage because, like, oh boy, that's dark.
No sleep till Brooklyn.
Yeah, so if you want to do West Coast, Hotel California actually fits. You can check in anytime you want, but you can never leave.
That's identity for you. There you go. I don't know how we top that one. That's a good one. All right, let's wrap it up. Happy Identity Management Day, Jeff, and to folks around the world, and Jim as well. Look forward to
I don't count as part of folks around the world, I guess.
Well, you do count as a person, as Jeff has indicated, so we will include you as that. But yes, there's a lot of stuff going on. Check out the website. We will have links in our show notes for people to check out. We will be part of the festivities, U.S. Eastern time. We'll have a live episode that we're doing kind of that, so I'm looking forward to that. Jim, to be transparent for people who are listening this the day before we do it, we still don't know what we're going to do, but we are doing something. So you'll have to tune in and see what our episode is for Identity Management Day. And thanks to Jeff for inviting us to do that. So thank you so much for that.
Great to have you there.
Yeah. So I will have links in our show notes. People check out all kinds of stuff. Connect with Jeff around music choices, theme choices, thoughts on quantum, AI, and everything in between. You can find us on the web, IDSApodcast.com. That's also where we have all of our latest discount codes. So don't forget to use those. So support for the show, whether you're going to EIC or Identiverse or conferences that are coming up later this year that we'll have discount codes for as well. So like, subscribe, do all that fun stuff. And we'll leave it there. Thanks everyone for watching and or listening. And we'll talk with you all in the next one.
You've been listening to Identity at the Center. We hope you've enjoyed the show. Make sure to like, rate, and review. And we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hit the website at identityatthecenter.com. See you next time on Identity at the Center.